Do Manchester City receive way too much protection from the mainstream media? Hey guys, welcome to the channel, welcome to another video. Today's video is going to centre around that very question as the subject of Manchester City. This club right here is the subject of our video here today. Do they really receive way too much protection from the mainstream media? It has been an absolute car crash of a season as far as what City are concerned. Not to their usual high standards anyway, in a season that promised a lot of hope and expectation going into it. Were City going to be the first team ever to complete the 5-peat, that is winning 5 Premier League titles in a row? Were they going to have other success in other competitions as well? That were the questions that were being asked in the summer of 2024. Fast forward to today though, and we have witnessed a season that has completely fallen apart and gone off the rails for City. They were out of the Carabao Cup very early. Their title challenge ended before the New Year period. They have been knocked out of the Champions League by Real Madrid in the playoff to the knockout stages in the newly formatted Champions League. And their only hopes of silverware this season rest on a potential FA Cup where they have to get past Nottingham Forest in the semi-final, which will then set up a final between themselves and either one of Crystal Palace or Aston Villa. Their chances of obtaining Champions League for next season may somewhat fall in their favour, but still hang slightly in the balance because nothing's ever a foregone conclusion in the Premier League. And this is all after spending £200 million or so in the January transfer window. It's safe to say that it hasn't exactly gone to plan for Pep Guardiola this season, but to my knowledge and recollection, I don't remember hearing a lot about the mainstream media making a big deal about this than it actually is. So why is that? Am I just not in the right circles? Am I just missing stuff completely on this? Or are the mainstream media actually protecting the likes of Pep Guardiola, Manchester City as a club, and certain individual players, which we're all going to come to in this video? We're going to be talking about the club, we're going to be talking about the manager, and we're going to be talking about certain individual players as well. But without further ado, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you are new. Both things will always and forever be greatly appreciated. I encourage you to get involved in the conversation as well. Let me know your thoughts, your comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it on this interesting topic at hand, because I'm sure what you have to say will make for great interest in reading. So please do use and abuse that comment section, people. And without further ado, we'll get on to the conversation ourselves. We're going to be talking Manchester City, their players, manager, and the club itself, in terms of whether the mainstream media is protecting them or not a lot this season. Now, I think it is safe to say that you could make the argument that this is just a one-off season for Guardiola and Manchester City. After winning the Premier League title in their past on the past 4 years in a row, after winning other trophies as well, including obviously that infamous and phenomenal treble-winning season, having a one-off season may not be cause for major concern. Like, it could actually be a time to really reflect on this team maybe hitting their ceiling and needing a bit of a revamp, a revive, and a sort of rebuild of sorts to get them all firing again on all cylinders and get their mentality and hunger back to challenge again for major honours for next season and the seasons to come in the future. That is an entirely fair argument, and if this is just a one-season thing, fair enough. But at the time of recording, this has been a dreadful season of Manchester City, in which I have not really seen a lot of criticism directed at Pep Guardiola, his players, or the club itself. I think the club deserves criticism for poor transfer windows in the past few years that maybe I myself from the outside looking in had given them the benefit of the doubt on, because although they are somewhat players that I wouldn't have thought City would have gone for, especially with the money and the funds that City have, I sort of thought, well, if Pep Guardiola has the say-so, if he has the green light at the end of it, and of course if Guardiola is on board with these signings, then he must have seen something in them that I haven't, and who am I to question the greatest manager in the modern day game today? Maybe not of all time, that's still up for debate, but of course the greatest manager of all time in today's game. Who am I to question that if he sees the likes of Mateus Nunes and your Mateo Kovacic's as being fantastic players that he can work with and get even more out of in this Manchester City team? But it's safe to say that some of those players haven't exactly took off the way that he was expecting. Even some players that were there have kind of had a bit of a drop-off, especially this season. Hasn't exactly been a wonderful season. A lot of factors to go into it. There's been a lot of drop-offs from certain players. I'm just wondering why the mainstream media hasn't picked up on this properly. There always seems to be some sort of excuse or deflection point when it comes to talk about how poor City have been this season. And I think Guardiola has done well in controlling the media in terms of directing the conversation elsewhere. I think he's took a little bit of the blame off his players by talking about, obviously, his personal relationship with his wife, obviously getting a divorce and all of that stuff. Him obviously suffering with things like IBS, him not sleeping well at night, the scratches on his face. I think he's done well with all of those things combined at taking some of the heat off of his players. And to an extent, that is what a manager probably should do. Even if it, like in his case, seemingly does not really benefit him, it directs the attention away from his players to try and ease the pressure a little bit. But there comes a point where that's not good enough anymore. There comes a point where those excuses and those things run thin. But the mainstream media haven't quite hit that point, that sweet spot yet. So I'm questioning again why that is. Like I say, the club deserve criticism for transfer windows that haven't exactly gone to plan. Pep Guardiola deserves criticism for maybe not having the foresight to see these kind of problems in an aging Manchester City squad when he obviously gets to witness them firsthand in comparison to me, an observer from the outside looking in. The drop-off of certain players, getting older of certain players, bringing back Ilkay Gundogan, for example, who is not the same Ilkay Gundogan that left Manchester City. De Bruyne's situation, how did they let that go out of control? A defence that is poor. Obviously Rodri's injury, but not necessarily having a backup plan. As unfortunate as that injury was, of course, not having a backup plan to Rodri, who had played so many minutes and so many games up to that point, that an injury was seemingly inevitable at some point. Just these little things that you can all just jab at Guardiola with and the club. And then there's the player side of things. Phil Foden. Phil Foden. Your last year's player of the season for the Premier League and for Manchester City, although Rodri went on to win the Ballon d'Or, which makes it very strange that was actually the case. But, yeah. Phil Foden's drop-off this season. Not been mentioned a great deal by the mainstream media. It gets talked about, but it gets brushed off as, well, everyone's having a bad season, so why should we scapegoat Phil Foden? Wasn't so long ago that Gary Neville was on his show The Overlap talking about how, regardless of his form, Phil Foden should be on that England team throughout. And there are caveats to that. You can say that maybe he hasn't turned up for his national team because he's been played out of position. Maybe he's had the wrong manager. But when you consider that he's playing in different positions for Manchester City and doing quite well, or much better than he has performed for his national team, begs the question of, that is a very strange point to bring up. Because he's played in lots of different positions this season alone for Manchester City. He plays off the right, plays off the left, he's played through the centre, he's played up front, he's dropped deeper at times. He's played all across the board. And when you look at his stats this season, 25 appearances, 7 goals and 2 assists in the Premier League. In overall stats, that is 40 appearances, 10 goals and 6 assists. That's 16 goal contributions in 40 appearances this season. It's not good enough for last year's player of the season for Man City. It's not good enough for the player of the year in the Premier League. When you look at his player of the year campaign, 53 appearances overall, 27 goals and 13 assists. That is 19 goals and 8 assists in the Premier League, which is a very, very good return. But you look at his past ones, 32 appearances in the Premier League, 11 goals and 5 assists. That was the 22-23 season. The 21-22 season, 9 goals and 5 assists. The season before, 2021, 9 goals and 5 assists in 28 appearances. So at least he was a little bit consistent there. But I know that he was young at the time, but this is the guy that's 25 years of age, about to go into the prime of his career. Looking around him at some of the players that are not going to be there anymore. Kevin De Bruyne has announced he's going to leave. He needs to be the one to step up, really. Take games by the scruff of the neck. He did so a few times last season, but he kind of strikes me as the kind of player that needs everything around him to be perfect in order for him to go about his business and to do exactly that. Take games by the scruff of the neck. Be a game changer. He needs things to be perfect around him. He needs the players around him to perform. He's not really that guy that is going to do that, in my opinion. When you look at guys like that, you look at Erling Haaland, you look at a Kevin De Bruyne, for example. City don't really have that in great abundance. When you look at players, they're all flashy, they've all got skills and tricks and things, but the end product just isn't there. I look at Jeremy Doku and this season's signing of Savinho, whichever one you want to call him. I see players that are flashy, but have no real end product. They'll get past the defender, but then they don't know what to do with it at the end. And unless, like, the defence they're up against is completely poor, that they, for whatever reason, leave an Erling Haaland free in the penalty area, they don't really have a lot in terms of creativity. One player that I look at for creativity is one Jack Grealish. This season, the stats don't make for great reading on Grealish. 18 appearances in the Premier League, 1 goal, 1 assist. And that goal actually did come last week in the game that they won against Leicester by 2-0. Last season, 20 appearances, 3 goals and 1 assist. Now, I think he was dealing with a few injuries last season, but even so, still not good enough from a player that was a £100 million signing. The season before, 28 appearances, 5 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League. He actually picked up 1 less yellow card than he actually did have goals in that campaign in the 22-23 season. And in the season that he signed for Manchester City with 3 goals and 3 assists and an equal number of yellow cards in that as well in 26 appearances. It is not good enough from Grealish. It is not good enough for a player who cost £100 million. Not good enough from all the other players as well that are flashy, but not exactly great when it comes to the final third. Don't really have an end product. Certain players have dropped off. Certain players never actually did arrive. And yes, you could argue that, again, do they really care? They're going to look back on their careers when they retire. They're going to look at all of their photos on their wall, all of the accolades that they did, the records, the things they won as a team, the winners' medals, and they're going to think, I had a successful career. And they did. But was it an integral part of their setup? This Manchester City machine that has dominated football will have names that are iconic to those seasons. De Bruyne was a massive part of a few of the Guardiola successful seasons. Haaland, of course, when he first arrived in the Premier League, smashing that goal-scoring record at the first attempt. You can also look at the likes of Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan turning up in big moments for City during those seasons. You can look at maybe even certain members of the back four turning up. Ruben Diaz, for example. There are going to be certain names linked with those seasons. And although Phil Foden did win and had a very good season, and I'm not knocking any of the other seasons I talked about, by the way, they are pretty good stats. But are they good enough to warrant him creating that legacy that, like, a Kevin De Bruyne is going to have when he leaves City? Like a Erling Haaland is going to have when eventually he moves on? I don't necessarily think it is. I think that he struggles when things aren't going all his own way. I think he struggles in a less than perfect setup. I'm starting to see that Phil Foden is a great player. There's no doubt about it. And he still will have his moments. He'll still chip in with goals. He'll still chip in with some good assists. He still has a bit of a creative spark about him. But ultimately, I see Phil Foden as being a cog in the machine and not a pivotal or integral cog at that. He is just part of a machine. He's not like a De Bruyne. He's not like a Haaland. He's not integral enough. And I do worry about that aspect of him. But going back to my main point, why are they so protected? Because again, there are distraction points. No one talks about bad seasons of Grealish. No one talks about bad seasons of Foden or Doku or Savio this season. No one's talking about how Haaland, yes, he's still got a lot of goals this season, but his performances aren't exactly there. No one's talking about the goalkeeper, how poor he is. No one's talking about the defence and how shocking they have been this season. No one's talking about Guardiola and not finding a plan for this despite spending 200 million in January. Yes, there are maybe a few reports out there that are talking about this, but the volume of them, even though I've seen the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson, Jurgen Klopp, Jose Mourinho, Carlo Ancelotti, Antonio Conte get slated in the media for having poor seasons or poor times in certain stages of their career, there's not been a great deal for City and for Guardiola. And I'm just wondering why that is. There always seems to be some sort of deflection. Gary Neville did it on Sunday. He talked about how football was robotic. Guardiola did it in his press conference again, talking about the chants that were directed at Phil Foden and his mother. That's just football fan banter, in my opinion. Like, as long as you're not crossing the line into territories of great tragedies, like Hillsborough, for example, with Liverpool, or the Munich air disaster with Manchester United, as long as you're not talking about that and mocking that, I think everything is pretty much fair game if you're a footballer, because that is part of what football fan culture is. It's part of what the creation and creative side of football fans is. As long as you're not crossing that line that I mentioned, you are fine with that. But again, it seems to be a deflection tactic. My players were not intense enough. My players were not great on that pitch against Manchester United, even though we needed that incentive to maybe make sure we secured top 4 for this season. But what about the chants that were being heard? And it's fine if you're going to be consistent about it, but I know that City fans have made chants about Munich, about Hillsborough, and about certain other events. I think there was a Liverpool fan a few years ago that got attacked, and certain City fans, or maybe even City players actually, were making a mockery of the guy who got attacked. And I don't think Guardiola came out and condemned it then. Not consistent enough. It just seems like it's a distraction tactic. It seems like the mainstream media are doing the same, and I want to know why. Look, those are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings. A bit of a ramble today, a bit of a rant. So if you did stay with me, thank you all so much for that. I know it seems like it's a bit all over the place, but I just wanted to call it into question. I wanted to gauge more your thoughts than my own. Is it a problem with the mainstream media? Is this just a one-off season, which is why they're not talking about it so much? Let me know what you guys are thinking and feeling down below in the comments section. Use and abuse that section, people. Talk to me on this. Would love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, hit the like button on the way. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you are new or want to see more content like this. Both things will always and forever be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video. Thank you all for your continued or brand new support to the channel. Really does mean a lot to me. You guys are absolutely awesome. Thank you all so much. Cannot never thank you enough. Will always be appreciated. Never take it for granted. And I will see and speak with you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Speak to you all again very, very soon.